Chapter 2.
They moved me again, another college. It was good, I suppose. But I hated it. They taught us to mock the very things I held dear, to cage imagination, tame the unruly mind. Yes, I remembered things easily. But just as quickly, I forgot them. Especially numbers. Math was my enemy. I'd hide on the back bench, trying to disappear between decimals. I still don't understand numbers. I never will. Then one day, my mother declared me old enough for an allowance. A family council was held, very formal, and they awarded me 40 lire a month for clothes. A pittance, even then. But somehow, I made it work. I turned one modest suit into many outfits, each a new illusion. I called the method, Schiap-stitched. I had no training, but I had instinct. And from that instinct came my first inventions, simple white blouses trimmed in lace, delicate, feminine, quiet revolutions. Every day, I walked to college alone. A scandal in my circle, but no one stopped me. At that time, I felt terribly isolated. My family felt like strangers. And inside me, something boiled. Like a kettle left on too long. I needed an escape, but I had outgrown mischief, outlived girlhood stunts. The last of those had caused a small disaster. It happened just after the earthquake in Sicily. The country was in mourning. Relief trucks roamed the streets, calling for clothing donations. People tossed garments, even housewares, from their windows. I watched in awe, then raced through our apartment, collecting every stitch of fabric I could find, even undergarments. I hurled them out the window in ecstasy. I nearly threw out my mother's prized astrakhan stole, edged in ermine tails, but stopped just in time. Almost. Then came a tremor far more personal. The desire to write, not letters, not nonsense, but poems. The urge struck me like lightning, shaking my entire body. I had no room of my own. So I dragged a chair and table into the corridor, erected a hideous Japanese screen, and made a sacred little cell. The view was dreadful, just a courtyard. But the scent of iris from the laundry made it feel like spring. Behind that screen, I vanished. Time melted. Even when guests arrived for my mother's salon, with its Persian vases and sandalwood air, I slipped inside unnoticed, curling on the velvet sofa, hoping not to be found. The voices of diplomats and dusty scholars drifted above me, refined, lifeless. But at night, oh, those Roman nights. Shepherds passed beneath our window, guiding flocks through the city. Black cloaks, black hats, shepherds' staffs and patient dogs. The sheep bleated beneath the moon, and I pressed my face to the pane, trembling with wonder. Years later, I reread my poems, and blushed. Could I have really written them? At the time, I hadn't understood what I was expressing. But now I saw clearly, grief and love, sensuality and mysticism, the inheritance of centuries, had poured themselves into the naive soul of a child. And yet, no success in life would ever bring me greater satisfaction than those poems. My cousin Attilio, the astronomer's son and a well-known art critic, became a dear friend. In a dark room, he kept a small collection of exquisite paintings. He believed only one piece of art should be seen at a time. He would take one out, hang it on the best wall, and once the mind and heart had absorbed its beauty, return it, and bring out another. It was Attilio who I entrusted with my poems. He read them, asked if he could hold on to them for a few days, and secretly sent them to a Milanese publisher, Signor Quinteri, without revealing the author's name. The very next day, Quinteri called him and said, "I'm publishing this book. But tell me, who wrote it?" So I traveled to Milan, under the guise of visiting family. Attilio brought me to the publisher's office. I was 14, small, timid, tucked into a corner as they spoke. Eventually, Quinteri, checking his watch, asked, "Do you think the author will arrive soon?" Attilio smiled. "But she's sitting right next to you." The publisher turned his gaze toward me. I shrank in my seat, feeling even smaller and more ridiculous than usual. Still, he published the poems. He called the book Arethusa, after the sacred nymph of the Sicilian spring in Syracuse. I wrote the dedication myself. To those I love, to those who love me, to those who made me suffer. It was a bombshell. Newspapers wrote about it, excerpts appeared across Italy, and even abroad. But to my father, it was a scandal. A disgrace. He refused to read the book. The family gathered, deliberated. And so, as punishment, I was exiled. Sent to a convent in the German part of Switzerland, to atone for my sins, and cool down a spirit far too wild for its time. The convent became an unexpected trial of spirit, a theater of repression dressed in rituals of obedience. Ever the exalted soul, I did not conform. My faith was sincere, yes, but it was mine, deeply personal, tied to the rhythm of creation, the harmony of the stars. I never needed intermediaries. At the convent, all connections to the outside world were severed. Letters, even those addressed to our parents, were scrutinized by the Mother Superior. Even our daily baths were policed. We were to bathe wearing coarse linen garments, forbidden from ever glimpsing our own naked bodies. And we could only remove them during the day by putting on another robe first. So, the very first thing I did? I cast off that dreadful tunic and bathed like a free woman. But someone was watching, through the keyhole. That same day, I was summoned. Outraged, I slipped on a pair of long black gloves, gathered my composure, and stood before the Mother Superior. There would be no mercy. She had laid my letters out on the table. They had decided. I was to be broken. But I was ready to resist. A stubborn adolescent squaring off against a bitter old nun. It was a cockfight of wills. Despite the fire in my poetry, I knew nothing of physical love. No wonder I was confused by some of the other girls' behavior. Especially one older student who followed me constantly, showering me with little gifts. I never saw it for what it was, until she embraced me and kissed me. Only then did the full weight of my family's puritanism crash down upon me. I made no secret of what I thought of convent life. I delivered my truth, bold, unfiltered. And then I collapsed. I stayed in bed for days. Desperate and alone, I declared a hunger strike. Still, I had to attend Mass every morning, where I fainted almost daily. One of the girls, the daughter of the Prime Minister, was returning to Rome. I slipped her a letter to my father. The moment he received it, he left for Switzerland. When he saw me, he said nothing. Just looked. And took me home. I had lasted exactly 99 days. Back home, there was a visitor. A Russian man, unattractive, with small slanted eyes and a broad beard. He would join us for dinner, then sit in silence, staring into space. Wealthy, yet austere, he donated all his riches to charity. For a time, my family assumed he was courting my sister. But then, he told my father, it was me he loved, and he wished to marry me. My parents were kind, but wisely declined. I was still too young. Still, each evening, he returned. And every morning, I'd find a letter at breakfast. He must have delivered them himself, on his way to Mass. Intellectually, he might have made me happy. But I was brimming with life. I had come to trust my body, and my imagination was far too alive. He lived in solitude for a year, and continued to write me tender, poetic letters. He even offered me his mother's jewels, one of the rare times a man ever gave me something truly valuable. Years later, he died in a mysterious accident in the mountains. No one ever discovered what happened. In the meantime, I fell wildly in love with the painter. I slipped outside the city walls of Rome to visit his studio. For the first time, I drank port. And I sat, motionless, under the pines, for hours. I was happy. He was clever, charming, a man who knew how to be loved by women. But families always find out, don't they? Mine discovered our romance. And more than that he was already engaged. To a modest girl of modest means. At first, I refused to believe it. But doubt began to bloom in my chest, a cold little seed. I needed to know the truth. I found his parents' address, people I'd never met, and knocked on their door. A family utterly average, middle class, not at all like their seductive son. His fiancée? She was small, like a schoolgirl. I pulled his parents aside and asked plainly, is it true he's engaged to her? Yes, they said, they'll be married soon. I turned, left, and walked. Mechanically, the tears came like a summer rain. Silent, unstoppable, I boarded an overcrowded bus. There was no seat left. My legs trembled. My head spun as if I'd just awakened from surgery. A young man beside me held a bouquet, surely for someone he loved. He looked at me, gently plucked a rose, and said, "You look so sad. I hope this brings you happiness." It didn't take long for my heart to love again. Youth does that. Passion, a hunger to be held by something real. This time, a boy from Naples. Warm, wild, and full of sun. He would travel up just to spend a single day with me. We couldn't meet at my home, so we wandered through the countryside near Rome. Together, we rediscovered ancient villas I'd once visited with my governess. But now, they were something else. Villa Doria Pamphili, Villa Borghese, Villa Medici, and the Villa d'Este with its 1,000 fountains, each drop a whispered promise. Of course, my family ended it. Again. But every week, a box of roses arrived. No note, no name. We met once more, by chance, on the island of Ischia, our families vacationing nearby. Months later, he wrote to say he'd watched me sail away on a steamer, and that he never married. I thought that was the end of my tragic love stories. I took to harmless flirtations, mostly with pretty boys who wore lilac. My favorite color. Each suitor would don a lilac handkerchief or tie, so the world would know, he's courting Schiap. One day, a friend confessed, her husband kept a crumpled lilac tie in his coat pocket. Around that time, I began writing about music, not as a critic, not with any formal training, but with heart. My tone was direct, natural. People liked it. One of my great regrets was that I couldn't sing. I longed for that liberation, the kind that empties your soul without exposing it. I flirted with theater, too. But had I ever set foot on stage, my noble parents would have called it a disgrace. They enrolled me at the University of Rome, too young for lectures, so they placed me in philosophy. And strangely, I loved it. My father, then immersed in Oriental studies, surely approved. I read Bossuet, Spinoza, and St. Augustine's Confessions. That book stayed at my bedside for years. And then, he returned. The Russian, beard darker than a storm, eyes like secrets. He began appearing again in our salon. My family wanted us married. They pressed. I resisted. Desperate, suffocated. That summer, we traveled to Viareggio, a glorious place in Tuscany, filled with pine forests and sea air. He followed us there. I had reached my limit. Something inside me snapped, or perhaps it finally bloomed. A friend of my sister, a so-called woman of modern views, had married a wealthy Englishman, much older than herself. Longing to adopt children, she wrote to my sister asking if she knew someone who could help raise them. All expenses paid. It was my chance, and nothing would stop me. I was going to London. Family friends accompanied me as far as Paris. This is forever. I'll never come back. I cried, believing with all my heart that my wings were strong enough to carry me. But life, it never quite holds the shape we expect. Still, I arrived in Paris for the very first time. The Gare de Lyon struck me as dull, nothing like the grand romance of Rome. But as soon as I stepped off the train, I declared, this is where I'll live. By chance, I ran into Alberto Lombroso, a brilliant Napoleonic historian and friend of my family. He said, there's to be a ball at the Enro, tonight. Wouldn't it be amusing if you came with me? A ball, and me? I had never been to one. I had no gown, but I said yes, with a heart wide open. I raced to Galeries Lafayette and bought 4 meters of deep navy crepe de Chine. It was madness, 10 francs a meter. I added 2 meters of orange silk. There was no time to sew. I wrapped myself in the fabric like a Zouave soldier, draped it between my legs. Made a wide sash, a turban. There was no money left for the hairdresser. And so I arrived at the ball. The Enro lived on Rue Jasmine, and for the first time, I stood inside a French interior. Madame Enro, a sculptor of some renown, had filled her home with the flavor of Italy. Her husband? A businessman. Before the dancing, there was dinner, and the salad of nasturtiums delighted me more than any main course. At the ball, my outfit caused a sensation. No one had ever seen anything like it. But as we danced, tango, not the lancers I'd learned in Rome, my outfit began to unravel. The safety pins gave way. Had my partner not whisked me off the floor, I might have debuted at the Folies Bergère. A glamorous disaster. My first true failure as a designer. In the following days, I was taken to Renan's home in Montmartre. To Anatole France's house. I drank it all in. Then I boarded the train to England. Ah, London, it felt like a déjà vu from centuries ago. Perhaps the Romans hadn't truly conquered Britain, but here I was, a Roman girl in exile. No grand welcome awaited me. But I was moved all the same, by the English railways, the polite cabbies, the tea. I don't recall where I first stayed, only that I was soon taken beyond the city, to the countryside. And those who have never lived in an English country house have never known its strange, subtle charm. It wasn't extravagant, but it was cozy, comforting, full of sun-dappled quiet. The hostess was enthusiastic, the children, delightful. You could see what freedom and gentleness did for them. Except, they were always hungry. Not from cruelty, simply from theory. Their mother believed in restraint, in temperance, in self-denial. And so the children looked as though they had just stepped out of a labor camp. In the quiet haze of early 20th century London, a woman begins to unravel the seams of her own destiny. What follows is a tale of exile, romance, and rebellion, stitched together with silk, spirit, and an unquenchable thirst for beauty. This is Elsa Schiaparelli. Narration begins, poised, lyrical, slightly ironic. At first, I endured it, the restraint, the rules, the weary weight of good principles. Of course, I valued dignity, but not to that extent. I longed for escape, and whenever I could, I fled to London, a city that suited me, even when it didn't. One afternoon, I got lost in one of those ghastly London fogs, thick as split pea soup. For hours, I wandered blindly through Hyde Park, gripping the iron rails for guidance. The Italian sun, the Roman skies, so very far away. Suddenly, I stumbled upon another human being, and, startled by the sheer contact with reality, I ran. I'd read too many English crime novels to expect anything good. Then came a lecture. A theosophical talk. The speaker was an enigmatic man, half Breton, half Polish, with a Swiss mother. I didn't know him, but I was captivated. He spoke of the soul's dominion over the body, of secret power, of eternal youth. It was like being hypnotized by a vision too old for this world, and too fragile for it. Everyone else filed out of the hall. But I stayed, transfixed. A message came. The lecturer wishes to meet the young lady. I rose, still spellbound. We talked. Our philosophies aligned, absurdly, completely. By morning, we were engaged. The family erupted. They rushed to London to stop the wedding. But it was too late, we'd already married, simply, quietly, at the town hall. No pomp, no gown. That same day, Piccadilly was overwhelmed by suffragettes, wild, defiant creatures with fierce eyes and broad shoulders. Led by Sylvia Pankhurst, they howled for women's rights, clawing at history with gloved fists. They got what they came for, and 1,000 new burdens besides. Men, of course, admire strong women. But rarely do they love them. A few find the delicate alchemy between strength and tenderness, but many who dare to walk alone forfeit the very thing they're chasing, happiness.